Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Environmental Justice Now. My name is Leah Jones, and I am the organizing coordinator and water justice organizer here at Virginia Interfaith Power and Light. Before we get started today, I'd like to do a brief land acknowledgement. While we are on a video call and many of us are joining in from different places, we want to remind ourselves that we gather on the unceded land of the indigenous peoples. I'm joining in from so-called Richmond, Virginia, and I am currently located on the land of the Powhatan and Chickahominy peoples. So if you are unsure of whose land you are on and you would like to find out, you can always visit native-land.ca to find out. So earlier this week, many faith communities celebrated the holiday of the Feast of St. Francis. And today we will be discussing how this holiday reminds us to care for creation and practice environmental stewardship. So to tell us more about the holiday and his own personal connection to it, we have the pleasure of welcoming John, our faith outreach coordinator and transportation organizer, back to the show. So hey John, how are you today?
Hi, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on, Leah.
No problem. So I just wanted to start, I guess, broadly for those of us who may not know what the Feast of St. Francis is. So
Yeah,
could you maybe just start by telling us more about the holiday and what this means? Like, what's this holiday all about?
yeah, absolutely. So Saint Francis of Assisi is a saint for many different Christian denominations, and he's most commonly associated with caring for animals and care for the natural world. So it's interesting. A feast day in this context doesn't mean like a large meal, as you might expect, but it's a yearly celebration for a particular saint. So in St. Francis's case, on October 4th, many Christian communities, mine included, celebrate it with a blessing of the animals, where members of the church bring their dogs, cats, turtles, or any other pet to be recognized and blessed.
People brought their turtles. Did anyone bring their turtle?
Not this time, but I have definitely seen people bring like, and heard people bring like snails or other.
The lizards.
Yeah.
Oh, that is so cute. So can you just tell us more now about maybe what the holiday means to you? I know you mentioned already that many faith communities, when they celebrate the Feast of Saint Francis, they bring their own pets to get blessed. But what outside of that, what does this holiday mean to you?
Yeah. So for context, I'm a member of the Episcopal Church, which is one of the denominations that celebrates the Feast of Saint Francis, and to me, it really reflects a time of connection and contemplation on the natural world, and bringing the animals that so many people hold dear and like as members of their own family. Um, People don't normally think about those relationships in a religious context. And the Feast of St. Francis, the blessing of the animals, and the recognition of them leaves a space to recognize them as members of God's own creation, um, and kind of opens and broadens people's minds to what is sacred and what is holy in their life. And so, in addition to like the blessing with the sermons and just the day, members are called to pray for environmental protection and conservation and to respond to the call to live a life based on simplicity and service to others in the vein of St. Francis.
Very cool. And I've actually never thought about how just people view their relationships with their pets in general. Like that's one of the easiest gateways, I think, to understanding environmental care, creation care, just recognize like seeing the bigger picture of things. And I guess that is a really good point, to connect those things. For whatever reason, I think our pets do get seen as something separate in the same way that people maybe are seen as something separate away from the natural world and environment. And then even furthermore, like just recognizing that relationship that you have with a pet who spends like years and years with you, in many cases, from a lot of us, is indeed like sacred. So, oh, I'm thinking about my own little cats. But I love that. So how do you see, you did touch on it a bit already, but how do you see the Feast of St. Francis connecting to the larger picture of creation care and environmental stewardship?
Yeah. So I guess this day that all of the members of the church or faith community coming together to recognize um, and like uplift this piece of creation that is the animals and the earth, is a reminder that we are all interconnected, that all living things, and even like the earth itself, are a part of God's creation and should be cared for and treated with love. So for Episcopalians, St. Francis Day is the culmination of the season of creation, where Episcopalians are called to pray for and act on climate change and work towards ending environmental racism and ecological destruction. So just really recognizing that interconnectedness, hopefully furthers that call.
So this is officially like the specific time of year for Episcopalians, specifically to care for creation.
Yes.
Oh wow, very cool. I never knew that. And I think that's awesome that like this is always something that is a reminder, like, as a holiday, to take that in account, because we can all see, as we share all the time, that our faiths, well, most faiths do teach us to, in some way, shape, or form, care for creation, have your care of creation is a form of worship, and your devotedness and just relationship with God. So I love that. I think you also wanted to share maybe a little bit more about Francis Assisi himself. You were telling me a little bit about it yesterday, actually, just to
Yeah,
give a bit of backstory.
sure.
It'd be awesome to share that.
So I think St. Francis's life is an example of like no matter where you start, you can always move towards doing good and like living a life, yeah, that is directed towards God. So he grew St. Francis grew up in Italy to the as the son of a wealthy Italian merchant, and like in his youth he was known for like living lavishly and going to parties. Um, but after he served in two different wars, he became disillusioned with that way of life and turned towards being in right relationship with creation and with God. So he went to the Pope to form his own um, religious community that was focused on simpler living, as the Society of St. Francis. And he really just exemplified a different way that Christians and people could live and relate to creation and to the earth. And so that's a part of why every year we celebrate his life as a way of living differently apart and alongside um, society and the earth in a new way.
Thanks so much for sharing that. I felt like when you were telling me about this just yesterday, and hearing it again now, it sounds like it's actually just very relatable. Even through today, I feel like most of us, well, I won't say most, but a lot of us do live lavish lives, whether we recognize it or not. And to think that there is someone, like I guess Saint Francis being an example of stepping away from living lavishly and devoting, I guess, yourself to the bigger picture and the betterment of everyone in the world around you is beautiful. And I think that that's something that we can all probably take a piece from. Um, yeah, thanks, John.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, it's
Well, do
I
you have?
agree.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say I agree, and it's so interesting to think about. Like we look back 8, 9 centuries, and we remember like this person who lived in this way. Like we wouldn't remember like a silk merchant specifically. But we remember this person who like gave up all of these things. He was able to convince the Pope to let him start his own religious community, not like using connections or like the wealth that his father had, but through his earnest appeal in faith. And I think
Mm,
that's really powerful and really speaks to how it's our actions that can really affect change no matter what our situation.
absolutely. So speaking of actions, that's a perfect segue. Do you have any actions that you would maybe like to encourage our neighbors to take during this time, or just anything that you would maybe also like to uplift or share from VIPL or your own faith
Yeah,
community if you would like?
yeah, absolutely. So thinking about this, I would broadly encourage people to think about their connection, whether that be connection with other people that you interact with on a day-to-day basis, with the animals in your life, or even like the plants that you pass on a walk or on your way to work. Trying to take a moment to recognize them as co-participants and as fellow members of creation. And so, like in Christian circles, we often talk about communion and our connection to God. Um, Yet so often in our own worlds, we pass by the presence of God just in the world around us. So taking a moment to recognize that and connect with that, I think, could be a nice thing to try during this time as we celebrate St. Francis.
Oh, that's such an important point. I feel like so many of us have tree blindness or just nature blindness in general. The landscape of your life just kind of fades to the back as you're moving through it. And I feel like in times where I always think that in times where I'm in nature, like surrounded by nothing else, are the times where you feel most aware and most connected to God, and a sense of like just something way, way bigger than yourself and that interconnectedness and the part that you even play in that. So absolutely. Oh, well, I think those basically all of the questions I wanted to ask you today, John, about the Feast of St. Francis. I did learn today. I had never heard of the Feast of St. Francis before I started working here at IPO. And even now, I feel like I learn more, especially in regards to the backstory of the holiday and why he celebrated. So thanks, John, for being here. Is there anything else you wanted to add before I start to wrap up?
No, just thank you for letting me have the space to talk about this. I think he's a very cool saint, and I mean the Pope is sidebars. The Pope, when they become the Pope, are named after a patron saint, and Saint Francis is Pope Francis's like patron saint or the saint he
Oh,
finds very important. So
yeah.
yeah,
Awesome. Well, before we sign off, I do want to plug our upcoming events. We do have an upcoming meet and greet for volunteers that I mentioned last week, and really it's an entire series for volunteers to participate in. So if you're interested in participating with VIPL in any capacity as a volunteer, no matter how big or how little, please be sure to head over to this link here, vipl.org/volunteer, to check out what we have planned. We have all sorts of workshops planned in the next coming months for the workshop series, including the meet and greet next Thursday, as well as workshop on phone banking and canvassing, and also one on lobbying for environmental justice. A couple actually on lobbying for environmental justice. So as we start to wind down the year and gear up for policy season in the new year, we're going to need your help, and we hope that you can take some time to hang out with VIPL and get involved with what we're up to. So, as usual, please also keep tabs on everything else that we have going on in addition to our volunteer workshop series by joining our newsletter list. You can also easily access that link on our website. And as usual, we'll be back again next week, and we hope to see you all there. Thank you.